This is still the AM show. We'll take you to Parliament shortly for us to talk about the reconvening of the House, which is beginning today. One of the major issues on the agenda of the House for this meeting will be the determination of whether or not Sarah Adwoa Safo, Honorable, can still hold her seat as Member of Parliament for the people of Dom Kwabenya. You know that she stayed away more than the constitutionally mandated number of days. She could absent herself without, reason. So the Privileges Committee of the House had met and had recommended that she loses her seat. But that is something that the Speaker of the House would have to, together with the House, decide on. So we'll be able to tell how this will go. That's one major thing on the agenda, or we expect to be on the agenda of the House. We will take you there for you to understand how this is. But we also have that report ready, and then we'll be sharing that with you again when the House reconvenes. Details of that report will be made available. But again, we'll bring you this report so that you could understand what it is. Listen to that report we'll put together on what to expect.
House on whether or not MP for Dom Kwabenya, Sarah Adwoa Safo, should keep her seat.
Mr. Speaker, the committees of this House has the authority to determine the urgency of a bill. Once they make a determination, it binds all of us. Plenary has no business in this. People should understand that. So this is not the first time a committee is authorized to make a declaration for on behalf of the House.
And the Parliament of Ghana is not the Speaker of Parliament. And that the Parliament and Parliament of Ghana is not the chairman of the Subsidiary Legislation Committee of Parliament. And that Parliament is not the majority leader, nor is it the minority leader. That the Parliament of Ghana is the well-constituted 275 members of Parliament elected thereon to exercise the legislative authority of Ghana on their behalf. On their behalf. And therefore, Mr. Speaker,
so a report has to come to this House, and the committee has to demonstrate to this House that the person was given the opportunity to exercise reasonable explanation, and the person did not provide reasonable explanation.
Speaker of Parliament Alban Bagbin deferred the decision to October when the House resumes.
I have consulted the old lady. The old lady has given me an advice, and I think that advice is correct, because the issue raised by the majority leader is both of substantive and procedural law. And I need time to submit to this House a reasoned, written ruling. I cannot, in the haste of today, give you the ruling.
Well, the time is due now, and with MPs returning from their constituencies on Tuesday, the Speaker's ruling is the most anticipated on the business agenda of the House. So this has been a long-drawn battle. The lines are drawn now. The majority side are going all out to argue that Sarah Adwoa Safo should lose her seat, whilst the minority, surprisingly, are rather supporting the Member of Parliament, saying, if anything at all, that debate must come to the floor, and the 275 members of Parliament should take that decision. It is expected to drag on for a while. When Parliament resumes in October, members will be expected to go back to this vexed question and take a decision that will potentially leave some precedent for the future. This Sarah Adwoa Safo saga is not going away. Parliament will also deal with a number of key issues at this meeting, including considering the 2023 budget and economic plan of government in the times of economic difficulties and hardship, as well as a number of bills. For Joy News, Kweku Asante.
So that was our report on what to expect in the House as they reconvene on this particular matter. We've been joined on Zoom by Dr. Rashid Rahman. He is the Executive Director of the African Center for Parliamentary Affairs. Thanks so much for finding time to join us, sir. Now, Parliament is reconvening. What are your expectations of what the House should be looking at in terms of all that happened before they went on recess?
For me, and I believe for most Ghanaians, we are living in very difficult times. And I believe that what we expect from Parliament between now and December, when they go on recess, is very serious scrutiny of government business in difficult times. Because I believe today, if you go out of your studio with your microphone and you talk to 10 out of 10 Ghanaians, the key issue that is on everybody's mind is the economy. So we believe that Parliament has a very, very important role during this time, particularly also because this is the budget period. We'll be looking at the economic policy of government. We'll be looking at all the happenings with the IMF program, and so on and so forth. So parliamentary scrutiny in difficult times, I believe this should be the #1 priority of our Parliament during this sitting.
You have a lot of experience in terms of how Parliament to do work. As we talk about the economy, what specific action or actions do you expect Parliament to take in these difficult times, or to help government in these difficult times?
Well, our country, as well as many other countries around the world, are now saddled with a lot of debt. There's a lot of talk today, I think, in economic circles among civil society organizations about the role that Parliament should be playing, not only in our country, but across the continent, in terms of how our countries would manage their debts. So I would expect that, one of the important roles that Parliament will play during this time is to carefully look at, what is it that it can do in order to make sure that our country doesn't sink further into a lot of debt. What is it that it can do in order to also make sure that, for instance, all the economic financial agreements that come before the House, how do we make sure that, whatever borrowing that our country is going to be making, these are going into alleviating the plight of the millions of Ghanaians that are under very harsh economic times. And then I think it's also important to make sure that whatever budget and economic policy that comes before the House, there is very serious negotiation and dialogue. We saw in the last budget session, saw what happened with e-levy. It looked like the two sides did not see eye to eye. I think this is not the time for us to be going through those kinds of disagreements and infighting in Parliament and so on and so forth. There is a need for very serious discussions between the Minister for Finance and Parliament, particularly the minority group, so that we don't wait to the last minute, when programs are supposed to be approved before discussions start. Because at this period in our history, I think Ghanaians cannot stomach any disagreement and any infighting in Parliament that will delay economic policy programs of government and so on. We have to move with a lot of speed, but at the same time, we have to make sure that Parliament is watching with eagle eyes, so that whatever money is being borrowed, whatever money is at the disposal of those who are the duty bearers in our country, those resources go to where they are supposed to go to.
And obviously, once the minority group would want to check on how the executive arm will be borrowing, there will be some misunderstandings, and we'll be expecting that those sort of infightings will come up. I'm not sure a discussion prior can really save the situation, isn't it? Shouldn't we expect to see some of these things looking at where we are?
Well, I mean, certainly a discussion prior would save the situation, because if you recall, during the last budget session, at the time when the argument was very heated, that was when the Minister for Finance said, let's withdraw, let me go and have a discussion with the minority. And the minority said, no, this is not the time for discussion. The time for discussion is over. So the point I'm making is that certainly there will be disagreements, because the ideological orientation of the two parties, even though these days they are all coming towards the middle, because we are seeing policies that usually we can't recognize whether they are actually coming from the right and so on. So the point is, those disagreements have to be resolved, during the first hour, not the 11th hour. And I believe if there are discussions, if there are negotiations, if there's a lot of dialogue, some of these disagreements can be ironed out, before they get to plenary. So that's the point I am making here.
Okay. We anticipate that the Sarah Adwoa Safo issue will be will be high on the table. Is that something you do expect as well, or because of the economic challenges, you feel that it's something that won't really be on high this time around?
Well, I mean, I believe it will come back, but look, this is a non-issue. To be very honest, this is a non-issue, because the Constitution is clear, the standing orders are clear. The honorable member has vacated her seat. So all that maybe the right honorable speaker will be doing is just perhaps maybe recounting what the Constitution says and what the standing orders say. Because even the right honorable speaker technically has no power to dismiss anybody from Parliament. The Constitution is clear. Member of Parliament vacates his or her seat. I mean, those are the renditions of the Constitution. And I think through the actions of the honorable member, I mean, political arguments are being made here and there. But through the actions of the honorable member of Parliament, she has vacated her seat. So I think Parliament should not be wasting precious time on this matter. There are very serious matters of the economy that they have to deal with. They should dispose of this issue very quickly and move to making sure that our country is stable and our economy is stable, and then the plight of the millions of Ghanaians are addressed.
But obviously, the member of Parliament herself would disagree with your point there, that she has vacated, because she says she is still the member of Parliament for the people of Dom Kwabenya.
Well, I mean, that's fine. I mean, she can disagree with my view, but I'm just looking at what the Constitution and what the rules say. I'm not the one who crafted the Constitution, and I think it's quite clear how many days, weeks, months, and perhaps even almost a year has the member of Parliament been absent from Parliament. I think it's very clear. Yeah. So please, I mean, we shouldn't be playing with these matters. Otherwise, we are setting a very, very bad precedent. I know the two sides are playing politics with this. It is very clear, because it is in the advantage of one group or the other. I mean, her continuous absence gives an advantage to one group. And I think that is what is the issue, not what the rules say. The rules are quite clear. The rules are quite clear.
Okay. But what does it mean for Parliament itself to be going against the provisions of the Constitution? Because the Constitution, as you say, makes it clear that it should be read. So if Parliament is dilly-dallying with it, it has grave consequences, isn't it?
Indeed, and that is why, if you remember, during the budget period, when we had a challenge of the first deputy speaker trying to vote, and then there was all the confusion that ensued, and then eventually, what did we see? We saw a precedent that was set. The Supreme Court had to get involved to interpret the Constitution for us. And I think that that's what Parliament should avoid. Because if we get to a point where each time the Supreme Court has to get involved to tell Parliament what it should do, I believe it's not good for our country. And I think it's mainly because of the fact that the two sides cannot agree and cannot see clearly eye to eye in terms of what the rules say.
Okay. All right. Samuel Bing is the Executive Director of the Parliamentary Network Africa. He is also joining us on this discussion. Sami, good morning and welcome. What is your expectation like as Parliament reconvenes today?
I couldn't agree with Dr. Draman more in some of the earlier points that he had made, at least from the time that I joined. But to say that, look, in a country where we are in such dire economic situation, Parliament must come to the party, you know. People are expecting that their representatives would actually show reason why they are representatives of the people, you know, in these very, very critical times. In a time when, you know, the economy seemed to be, you know, or had taken a nosedive and communication is scanty and nobody's telling anybody anything except for calling our bluffs in a situation where, you know, the people are struggling. We are all struggling. We expect that our representatives in that house of accountability, in that house of holding the executive to check, would be calling on or will be taking advantage of the tools available to them to let us know why they truly. This is the third meeting of the second session of this current parliament. Third meetings are the budget meetings. And of course, this couldn't have been a better time to have parliament reconvene. I wished personally that, you know, parliament would have come back earlier with all that the country had been going through. We've had many instances where under very not so serious circumstances, parliament have resumed earlier, you know, to be able to discuss certain matters. I really think that having Parliament come on the 25th of October, when we know that they certainly will be out of Parliament again before the 25th of December, is some lost time. But be that as it may, we still believe that better late than never. As they are back, they will be able to do the needful because all eyes would actually be on Parliament.
But the greater work lies with the executive. Parliament would have its say, like they always say, the minority will have its say, but majority will have its way. What do you expect Parliament can really do to really help us in this circumstance we are in? Dr. Dawan has spoken about the fact that they need to, you know, scrutinize the policies and the budgets that will be coming in. But the executive would have to have a meeting with Parliament before, it comes to the floor so that we don't have that banter. In your own, you know, perspective, what do you think the Parliament can effectively do in helping us out of where we are?
I have argued that the minority having their say and majority having their way mantra does not apply in this 8th Parliament, really. And anybody in that Parliament that cites that in this 8th Parliament really should treats her with the contempt that he or she deserves, because the people of Ghana in the elections of 2020 voted a very unique parliament, one that should be able to stand with us, by us, and for us in such critical times. And of course, Dr. Draman had indicated a bit about what Parliament can do so far as the budget is concerned. In fact, one of the things that I personally expect as an immediate situation when the House resumes is that people who are managing our economy must come to Parliament to speak to us through our representatives. We cannot have a situation where everybody is gone silent. Once in a while, a meeting is ended with the IMF, for example, and we receive a one-pager, two-pager press statement, and that is it. In a situation, in a time which, in my opinion, is as critical as we found ourselves when COVID hit us, and we were being addressed almost on a weekly basis. We cannot sit idle and not hear from those who are managing our economy. When, I go buy something today and 2 weeks from now, when I do, I buy it at 2-3 times the price when I am supposed to do business as a trader, and the dollar rate is not allowing me to be able to achieve what I need to achieve. I expect that Parliament will use the tools available to them. And there are many, many tools available to Parliament to let the people who need to speak to the people of Ghana know that you must be speaking to the people of Ghana through their representatives. Of course, the media will be covering it, will be hearing it. I think that some of these things would even help bring some calm, when we are able to hear from our leaders through our representatives, when we are able to understand exactly what they are doing and how they are doing it, and how quickly it will be able to turn around the situation for us. So the tools are available to Parliament, whether it's at committees, whether it is through statements on the floor of Parliament, whether it's through parliamentary questions, whether it's through emergency situations or meetings or convenings with the central bank folks, with the Ministry of Finance folks, with whoever. I think that and of course in places where Parliament and the executive are serious about the work that they need to do and the effect that it has on the people of the country, we would have the executive having almost daily conversation with the legislature in these times. We would have the presidency move to the parliamentary enclave almost on a daily basis to have conversations, to have discussions, so that we can be able to put minds together. Because at this stage, it is no longer an MPP and NDC situation. It is no longer a majority-minority situation. It's a Ghana crisis. And we all have to get involved as Ghanaians to be able to get ourselves out of this crisis situation. So there's so much that Parliament can do. And especially around this time, it is so critical.
I'll come back to the economy issue, but let me have your thought on whether or not you feel it should, how the Adwoa Safo conundrum should be handled once Parliament reconvenes from today.
Well, Speaker Baldwin told us that he needed to have a reasoned ruling on the matter. He didn't think that he wanted to rush it on a day that the House was rising, and so he needed time. Fortunately, he's had so much time, so much time. We expect that he would have written a reasoned ruling by now. Like Dr. Draman said, some of us are not expecting any ruling different from what must be done. I don't think that the honorable member for the Dom Kwabena constituency has any business in Parliament. I've said this many times, and I don't expect that the Speaker's ruling will be any different from that. We'll be waiting and watching, and like Dr. Draman said, around this time when we have major issues to talk about, we do not expect that they would come into the House and will be dilly-dallying around such trivial issues, in my opinion, when there are more critical, bigger, weightier matters to be dealt with. So I expect that the Speaker will dispose of this particular subject matter, even today, as the first sitting day, and then we can move to the more grave, issues that we need to deal with.
Back to the economic issue. I know that our parliamentary setting is quite different from that of Britain. But with what we've seen in Britain in the last couple of weeks, can our parliament have any sort of reflection in that area in terms of there's been calls for the finance minister to be fired? Is there anything Parliament can do, Dr. Draman, if you can start for me? Can Parliament really do anything in this regard, taking a cue from what has happened in Britain, even though our settings are two different things altogether?
Well, I mean, yeah, unfortunately, I think, yes, I mean, as you rightly said, the settings are different. Because in England, I mean, in the parliamentary Westminster system, once your economic policy is defeated, then I think not only the minister is fired, I mean, the whole government is fired. Unfortunately, we don't have, I mean, the same system here. There have been calls for, the minister to be fired. I even had calls, I mean, yesterday, talking to some media group that the president should be impeached and so on. Now, granted, we have a hung parliament, we have almost equal numbers. But when it comes to matters such as this one, firing the president, firing the minister, and so on, I think you need higher numbers. And at this time, I am not too sure whether, for instance, even if the minority is minded to make sure that the minister is fired or censured and so on, they can muster the two-thirds number that is needed. They have 136 or so, and I think they need about half of the other side to join them in order for some of these things to be possible. I think maybe, I mean, what we were all expecting is that those who have failed in terms of managing the economy will do the honorable thing. Because we saw in England, the Prime Minister said, I can't govern anymore because of the fact that her policy, sent the country crashing, I mean, economically.
Yeah.
Many are finding some comparables to what is happening in our country, that those who are managing our economy have sent our economy crashing. And, they should do the honorable thing. I mean, we cannot rely on Parliament because we know politics will not allow that to happen. But I think they should rely on their own morals, their own ethics, and their own integrity and say, look, this is difficult for me. I can't do it. Let me leave the space and let somebody else come and do the job.
Well, quite a difficult thing to happen in Ghana. So,
indeed,
I'm sure we won't expect that to happen. But and if Parliament can't do anything, then we can probably learn to cope with the situation and see how. Government has really said they are going to do other things to help turn around the situation. Yesterday, the Minister of Information made us aware that there are some steps government is going to take. For example, the Bank of Ghana is meeting with universal banks and forest bureaus to talk about how the dollar can be regulated. Even though we are talking about, Parliament, but in that regard, does that inspire any hope for you? Maybe, Sammy, you start with this. Okay, Dr. Damaras, you started. Maybe conclude for me, and then I'll come to Sammy.
Okay, all right. So I just want to say that I think our country has been here many, many times before, even though this time is unprecedented. I'm talking about the depreciation of the cedi and then the fundamentals of our economy. Look, I'm not an economist, but the little economics that I did in the university tells me that, if our economy is dependent on imports, everything that we do in this country, I think about 90%, even the food that we eat is imported. There's going to be pressure on our currency every single day. Look, let me give you a very simple example. I went to a Southern African country recently. I went to Botswana. And then there was a bit of a shortage of onions in the supermarkets. Then I started asking people in Parliament, what is going on here? And they told me that it's not only onions, but many food items. The government has banned the importation of those food items because it puts a lot of pressure on their currency. And so then I asked the next question. So why don't you become self-sufficient before you ban the imports of these items? They say, no, we have tried it before. If we want to become self-sufficient, it's going to take a very long time when you give people the latitude. You have to force people and you have to force policy. In this country, when this government came to power, we had a number of flagship programs. And maybe one of them, I believe, is Planting for Food and Jobs. Mm-hmm. And the goal of that program was supposed to make us self-sufficient. Very laudable program. If we're self-sufficient in food, I believe if you ask the economists, they will tell you how much our country spends on importing rice, how much our country spends on importing oil, mm-hmm. how much our country spends on importing even basic things like apple, bananas, and so on. Even tomatoes. I spent many years in Burkina Faso, and every single day, Burkina Faso, a landlocked country, a dry country, is a country that is feeding our country with tomatoes. And foreign exchange goes across the border every single day. Mm. The cabinet can talk, till the sun goes down. If we don't address some of these fundamental things, this is not the last time that whoever is in power will be dealing with the depreciation of the cedi.
Mm. According to OEC, in 2020, Ghana exported $222,000 of rice, making it the 170th largest exporter of rice in the world. This is exporting, the data I have here, but if you look at import, we imported $391 million worth of rice into Ghana in 2020 alone. And then we exported 222,000. So that is to give us, an estimate of how much we spend on import alone. And the import is $391 million of rice in 2020 alone. So it tells you that we do spend a lot. But so, Doc, we know that in Nigeria, during Obasanjo's time, a decision had to be taken in terms of rice, for example, that it's enough, we should eat what we grow. Can Parliament, and Sam, if you can tackle this for me, can Parliament really help in legislating at this moment in time to say that, well, what we can do to help our city is to say that these and these produce the importation of those should be banned. Rice, maize, millet, and those. Can Parliament really take that decision from the premises that Doug gave, that if we want to be self-sufficient before, we may not really get there any moment soon?
Well, Parliament can certainly involve itself in a lot of areas and ways that can help bring our economy back to normal in the short, medium, to long term. Of course, you speak about legislation. We know very much that legislation of such or laws of such magnitude are ones that certainly must have some buy-in from the executive branch, because usually you would have them introduce such laws in there and what have you. But I think that the critical point and the critical role that Parliament has to play in this is that Parliament, at its committee level, by its very composition as a house that is made up of representatives from the various parts of our country, has a role to play in ensuring that these conversations get started, in ensuring that the duty bearers are called out and asked to take critical, decisive action. They have a responsibility to ensure that they come together, work together in these times, let the minds meet, bring their critical expertise from either side together to have conversations around these. They also have a responsibility to move beyond the talk, because you see, in many of the instances, many of the times when we have had, crisis of this nature, Yes, you would have an institution of parliament, which by its very nature is expected to talk, to debate, to have conversations around such matters, have many debates, have many statements, have many conversations and discussions on the floor of parliament, make some very bold declarations and recommendations, but nobody takes anything forward, and then it is only left in the hands that I'm certain that if we took a journey down memory lane to be able to figure out in times when we have found ourselves in such depreciating situation of our currency, we would find marvelous statements on the floor of parliament that the hands that have captured with recommendations on how we can be able to better solve this. I think that what we need is action beyond the talk. And action beyond the talk comes through policies, comes through uniting as a nation to making bold steps, bold decisions that can help change things. Because we all know that the reason why we are in this vicious cycle where we come back to the same situation year in, year out, whether it's about inflation, whether it's about our currency, whether it's about excessive spending and what have you, is that we still hover around the same, situation. Nothing changes. Window dressed sometimes, it solves the problem temporarily, and then we come back to the same situation. So now we are supposed to have our House of Representatives, being added them with us and saying enough is enough. If it has to take a law for us to be able to get out of some of these situations, a law there must be. If it has to take some clear directives from the institution of parliament, working with the executive to have some of these things done, certainly that it must be. If it has to take some of the expertise in parliament and parliament taking advantage of its committee system to also gather other experts in our country through public participation to make contributions to why or how we can get out of this quagmire, so must it be. There's so much that parliament can do, in my opinion, and there's so much that the kind of parliament that we currently have can do. And it's my expectation that they would not come back and play the usual, party politics with this situation, because at this stage where we are, the forex bureaus will not ask you for your party card when you come wanting to exchange your money to do business. And the ports and the people that are important to us would not ask for which party one belongs when they have to trade with you and do business with you. It is purely a situation which requires all of us to come together. And yes, Parliament can play a very critical role in this, not just necessarily in legislating, but even in piling pressure on the executive branch to take the actions that they've got to take. In even deciding to include in their business statements on a weekly basis that, look, this parliament, between now and when parliament goes on recess again in December, every week, finance minister, please brief the house so that the people would hear from you on what is going on. Steps like that could help bring back a lot of confidence into the system while they deal with the medium to long-term policies and things that needs to be done to get us out of this, almost perpetual cycle.
Dr. Dawan, so if Parliament should ask you to consult for them on what to do in these times to help alleviate the challenges on the masses, what would you tell them? Doc?
I think I was muted. What I would tell them is, look, at this time, a lot of our vulnerable citizens need some cushioning. People are on fixed, very low incomes, yet prices keep skyrocketing. These people need help. We need to find money somewhere. Money is difficult to come by because right now, I don't know whether our country can even borrow money. I mean, if what we are hearing from the rating agencies, because I know, as a person, when your credit history is bad, nobody wants to give you any money.
Sure.
So at the macro level, if a country's credit history is bad, that's how I translate it, because like I said, I'm not an economist, but if I understand the ratings, if they say junk, and that means it might be very difficult for us to borrow money. But at the same time, we have to find money. And there's been a lot of calls to cut down on government expenditure. I think recently I saw some simple analysis in terms of even how government moves. I mean, the cost of government, I mean, the presidency moving from one place to the other, the cost of running our country. I think for me, if I were to advise Parliament, I would say there should be some dialogue with the executive to see where is it that we can cut. And I believe we can cut the size of our government. We can save a lot of money from there, and we can use some of that at least to perhaps maybe make some social interventions in order to help the most vulnerable of our citizens. I think the second thing, again, I will come to that over and over. When it comes to financial scrutiny, when it comes to watching our finances carefully with eagle eyes and making sure, like Sami said, I mean, the money doesn't have any color. When you want to go to exchange money at the Forex Bureau or when the economy is in difficulty, I mean, we are all in it, whether you carry an MPP card or you carry an NDC card and so on. Our parliament and most parliaments on the continent over the years have woefully failed when it comes to financial scrutiny. And I think our parliament is notorious for that because we have done some studies in the past which placed our parliament far behind some of her peers in terms of making sure that financial scrutiny is done in a way that is devoid of politics. We saw what happened during the e-levy. You know, our parliamentarians could not come together to at least see clearly what Ghanaians were talking about. And so I think, you know, financial scrutiny, like I said, particularly during hard times, should be one of the things that Parliament should be doing. And I believe there is a lot of talent in this country that can support Parliament. Parliament can draw from most of these talent in order to help shape policy. But at the same time, I think we run a presidential system where the president runs the executive and Parliament is independent of the executive. So I think dialogue, a lot of it has to happen during this time. Like Samuel was saying, you know, this is a time when the executive should move to the parliamentary enclave. This is a time when we should have our ministers and those who are responsible for running our economy addressing the representatives and addressing us through the representatives almost on a daily or weekly basis. So I think these are some of the things that Parliament should be doing. Let them put the politics aside. I know it's easier said than done. But I think at this time, we want all of them to rise beyond partisan politics, to look at what is Ghanaian, to look at the Ghana project. And we don't want a situation where some crazy person would wake up and say there's a vacuum, our elite cannot understand each other and cannot work together, and let me come and take power. And we have seen those excuses in our neighboring countries, isn't it? And I think that those should be very serious lessons for our leaders because we are playing with fire. I mean, if we continue to play politics with matters such as these ones, especially matters that affect, you know, the livelihoods of people.
Okay, all right. So there's a period where partisan politics should not take center stage in Parliament, right?
Indeed.
Okay.
Indeed.
Now, so just as we wrap up, I'll give you each a minute to share with us your concluding remarks. But let me ask this question. How disappointed will you be if the Speaker goes ahead to make a ruling that Sarah Adwoa Safo can still hold on to her seat as Member of Parliament?
Look, as Sami said, I mean, we don't expect anything different from what the books And the books here, I'm referring to the Constitution and the standing orders. Over the years, let me be very candid here. You know, many Ghanaians have not had any confidence in the Privileges Committee because many Ghanaians have argued that Parliament has failed in terms of managing its own kind of internal issues. I mean, when it comes to overseeing its own shortcomings, usually matters are referred to the Privileges Committee, and then that is almost like sending them to the grave. So this is a very important test case. A precedent is going to be set, and I think all eyes are on the Right Honourable Speaker. And like I said, the Right Honourable Speaker is going to, it's not going to do anything more than just pronounce what the books say. And I hope he will do the right thing.
Okay. If that is the case, then we can start writing that Adwoa Safo has lost a seat, isn't it? Because that's what the book says.
It's as you have seen over the many months, something that is quite straightforward has not been straightforward. So, I don't know, but like we've been saying, our country is sinking, so are many countries. And Parliament should spend time on a daily basis, every single minute that they sit in that house, they should be dealing with our economy and not trivial issues like some honorable member of Parliament has decided to just go away and then use all kinds of technicalities to still hold on to her seat. This issue must be disposed of as quickly as possible so that our representatives can move on to dealing with the serious matter of getting us out of these economic difficulties that we all currently are facing.
So, thank you very much. Samuel, let me bring you in for your concluding remarks on this.
Yeah, I think that there's nothing more to say on the Honorable Dom Kwabena MP situation. We expect that Parliament, if they want us to take them seriously, as an institution that wants to deal with absenteeism, as an institution that the people must regard and take seriously for what it is, they must do the needful. And the Speaker is well clothed with experience and reputation of the institution, and he himself, being on the line. But by way of closing comments, this meeting of Parliament is a critical one. It is one that will make the citizenry know whether, when push comes to shove, and our House of Representatives must show that they are there for us, they are with us, they are our people, and they are standing with us. Indeed, they are able to stand with us. And so Parliament must know that for its own PR purposes, for its own institutional reputation purposes, we must not see some of the things that we have seen in previous meetings in Parliament. They must live beyond reproach, because that's what we expect of them.
Thank you very much, Samuel Bing. Samuel Bing is the Executive Director of the Parliamentary Network Africa. Earlier, you heard Dr. Rashid Draman. He is the Director, the Executive Director of the African Center for Parliamentary Affairs.